Today at the National Press Club, Australia's e-safety commissioner, Julie Inman Grant. She's helping young Australians navigate the dangerous currents of social media and assisting with the implementation of the government's minimum age legislation. Julie Inman Grant with today's address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia for today's Westpac address. My name's Tom Connell, I'm the club's president and also Sky News chief election analyst and politics anchor. Today's speaker is Julie Inman Grant, the e-safety commissioner. The theme, swimming between the digital flags, helping young Australians navigate social media's dangerous currents. We have, of course, we're on the cusp of the government's social media minimum age legislation, so effectively banning social media for 16s or under 16s, backed by most voices in Parliament, including the opposition. It's going to be an address, I'm sure, and it's a topic many parents are very interested in. What's best for children? How guilty should we feel if we've handed our phone to a kid to get 30 minutes of peace at a pub, perhaps? Maybe that's just my own experience. And perhaps for some of the kids who might be homesick today watching, wondering what they're going to be restricted from doing in the near future. The Commissioner's career began at the US Congress in Washington, DC, before joining Microsoft. She spent 17 years in various corporate affairs roles. Twitter as well, she set up the company's policy and philanthropy programs across Australia, New Zealand and Southeast Asia, so she knows the area very well. For those of you watching at home, you can join the conversation on X, where our handle is @PressClubAust. You can use the hashtag NPC as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Julie Inman Grant.
And as you can imagine, my biggest fan base is on X. Hello, everyone. It's really great to be back here in Canberra at the Press Club again. It's hard to believe it, but the last time I stood on this podium was 7 years ago. And I'm going to be canvassing a very different online world than the one that I talked about back then. And while 2018 doesn't seem that long ago, in tech terms, it's not just a life cycle, it's a lifetime. I think you'd all agree that social media has come massively from its early days, reflecting trend towards short-form video, ephemeral media, live streaming, and feeds curated by opaque algorithms, representing technological convergence that's blurring previously distinct lines. And I'll shortly be discussing how eSafety plans to implement Australia's social media minimum age bill. But first, I'd like to touch on some of the other remarkable changes that we've seen the online world undergo, driven by rapid advances in technology, seismic shifts in user behavior, and of course, the exponential growth of artificial intelligence. And just as AI has brought us much promise, it's also brought us much peril. And these harms aren't just hypothetical. These are taking hold today. In February, eSafety put out its first online safety advisory because we were so concerned with how rapidly children as young as 10 were being captivated by AI companions, in some instances spending up to 5 hours per day with sexualized chatbots. Schools reported to us that these children had been directed by their AI companions to engage in explicit and harmful sexual acts. Further, there is not a single week that goes by that there isn't a deepfake scandal or crisis in one of Australia's schools. Back in 2018, it would take massive numbers of images, huge computing power, and a lot of technological expertise to create a credible pornographic deepfake video. Today, the most common scenario involves harvesting a few images from social media, plugging it into a free app on a smartphone, and then, while the cost to the perpetrator seems free, the cost to the victim survivor, we can tell you, is lingering and incalculable. And so herein lies the perpetual challenge of an online safety regulator, trying to simultaneously fix the tech transgressions of the past while simultaneously remediating the harms of today and keeping a watchful gaze towards the threats of the future. And there is little doubt that the online world of today is far more powerful, more personalized, and much more deeply embedded in our everyday lives than ever before. It's also immeasurably more complex and arguably much wilder. That ethos of moving fast and breaking things has been ratcheted up in the age of AI, heightening the risks and raising new ethical, regulatory, and societal questions, as well as layering an added area of uncertainty about what even the near future might hold. But behind all these changes, some things remain the same. Very few of these technologies and platforms were created with children in mind or with safety as a primary goal. Today, safety by design is not the norm, it is the exception. Very few of these platforms and technologies continue to focus on engagement of profit. User safety is now being demoted, dumped, or deprecated altogether. So while the tech industry regresses backwards, we must move forwards. And that is precisely what Australia is doing. The Albanese government's social media minimum age law is the first of its kind to pass anywhere in the world, with overwhelming support across the parliament and the states. Numerous other countries are now hotly debating these issues, seeking effective age assurance interventions to correct this imbalance. And I can assure you, they're beating down our door to find out just how Australia plans to take this bold regulatory action forward. Now, the relationship between social media and children's mental health is one of the most important conversations of our time. It naturally generates much debate and emotion. Therefore, it's important that we ground these discussions in evidence and prioritize the best interests of the child from the start. And even more importantly, that we engage young Australians in these discussions throughout the policymaking and implementation process. There is no question that social media offers benefits and opportunities, including connection and belonging, and these are important digital rights we want to preserve. But we all know that there's a darker side, including algorithmic manipulation, predatory design features such as streaks, constant notifications, and endless scroll to encourage compulsive usage, as well as exposure to increasingly graphic and violent content online. These are indeed treacherous waters for our children to navigate, especially while their maturity and critical reasoning skills are still developing. And this is where we can learn so much from tried and tested lessons of water safety that Australia has pioneered. From the backyard pools to the beach, Australia's water safety culture is a global success story, a mixture of regulation, education, and community participation that reduces risks and supports parents keeping their children happily and safely frolicking in the sea. Picture any major beach in Australia, and it will likely include the familiar sight of yellow and red flags fluttering in the breeze, children splashing in the waves, and lifeguards standing watch. Parents keep a watchful eye too, but are quietly confident in the knowledge that their kids will be okay, not because the ocean is safe, but because we have learned to live beside it. We teach our kids to swim, and we give them the skills to recognize and master the ocean's dangerous and sometimes unseen currents. We do everything we can to minimize the risk of drowning, but we understand that the sea represents such a powerful and vast force that we can never hope to totally eliminate the risks. We have to take the same approach online. This cannot simply be about restriction, but also about phased safety preparation, coupled with multiple forms of oversight. We cannot totally fence off this vast digital ocean, but we can equip young people with essential survival skills to not just keep their head above the waves, but to thrive and stay safer. Teaching digital and algorithmic literacy is the closest thing we have to online swimming lessons. And eSafety has a vast repository of resources and programs to facilitate this learning today. By helping children to think critically, to spot social engineering and deepfakes, and to heed those warning signs, we're setting our kids up for more online independence, resilience, and enjoyment in their later teen years. Australia's social media age restriction bill is one way we are planting those flags in the digital sand. It's also putting accountability precisely where it belongs, on the platforms themselves. But calling it a ban misunderstands its core purpose and the opportunity it presents. We're not building a great Australian internet firewall, but we are seeking to protect under 16s from those unseen yet powerful forces in the form of harmful and deceptive design features that are currently engaging their usage online. For that reason, it may be more accurate to frame this as a social media delay, giving children a reprieve from the pervasive pull of platforms engineered to keep them digitally entranced and entrenched. A forced delay was precisely the idea behind the 36 Months campaign, a concerted national effort to prioritize the mental health of Australian children by pushing for access to social media to be increased from the ages of 13 to 16. Importantly, this new regulation will give us all precious time to build up our children's online swimming skills, so when they are ready, they'll possess the confidence to swim against the tide of harmful content flooding their social media feeds. The potential risks to children of early exposure to social media are becoming clearer, and I have no doubt that there are parents in this room today who could share stories of how it has affected their own children and families. And that is why today I'm presenting some of our latest research for the first time, which reveals just how pervasive online harms have become for Australian children. We surveyed more than 2,600 children between the ages of 10 to 15 to understand the types of online harms they face and where they are experiencing this happening. Unsurprisingly, social media in this age group is nearly ubiquitous, with 96% of children reported having used at least one social media platform. Alarmingly, around 7 in 10 kids said they had encountered harmful content, including misogynistic or hateful material, dangerous online challenges, violent fight videos, and content promoting disordered eating. Children told us 75% of this harmful content was received or encountered on social media. YouTube was the most frequently cited platform in our research, with almost 4 in 10 children reporting exposure to harmful content there. This also comes as the New York Times reported earlier this month that YouTube surreptitiously rolled back its content moderation processes to keep more harmful content on its platform, even when the content violates the company's own policies. And this really underscores the challenge of evaluating a platform's relative safety at a single point in time, particularly after we see platform after platform rolling back its trust and safety teams, weakening policies designed to minimize harm, making these platforms ever more perilous for our children. Perhaps the most troubling finding was that 1 in 7 children we surveyed reported experiencing grooming-like behavior from adults or other children at least 4 or 5 years older. This included asking inappropriate sexualized questions or requesting that they share nude images. Of those affected, just over 60% said their most recent experience with grooming occurred on social media, which just highlights the intrinsic hazards of commingled platforms designed for adults but also inhabited by children. Cyberbullying remains a persistent threat to young people, but isn't the sole domain of social media. While 36% of kids experience online abuse from their peers there, another 36% experienced online bullying on messaging apps, and 26% through online gaming platforms. This demonstrates that this all too human behavior can migrate to wherever kids are online. What our research doesn't show, but our investigative insights and reports from the public do, is how the tenor, the tone, and the visceral nature of cyberbullying affecting children today has changed and intensified. We've started to issue end-user notices to Australians as young as 14 for hurling unrelenting rape and death threats at their female peers. Caustic language like the acronym KYS, shorthand for Go Kill Yourself, is becoming more commonplace. I think we can all imagine the worst-case scenario when an already vulnerable child is targeted by a peer who doesn't fully comprehend the power and impact of throwing those digital stones. Sexual extortion is reaching crisis proportions, with eSafety experiencing a 1,300% increase in reports from young adults and teens over the past 3 years. And our investigators have recently discovered a worrying trend. We have seen a 60% surge of child sexual extortion over the past 18 months, targeting 13 to 15-year-olds. But we've also seen an increase in reports from 16 to 17-year-old boys, again demonstrating the importance of building resilience of this upper range of teens so that when they do come back online, their defenses have been hardened to anticipate and meet these looming online threats. As I've mentioned before, the rise of powerful, cheap, and accessible AI models without built-in guardrails or age restrictions are a further hazard faced by our children today. Emotional attachment to AI companions are built in by design, using anthropomorphism to generate human-like responses and engineered sycophancy to provide constant affirmation and the feeling of deep connection. Lessons from overseas have highlighted tragic cases where these chatbots have engaged in quasi-romantic relationship with teens that have tragically ended in suicide. In the Character AI wrongful death suit in the US, lawyers for the company effectively argued that the free speech outputs of the chatbots should be protected over the safety of children, clearly as a means of shielding the company from liability. Now, thankfully, the judge in this case rejected this argument, just as we should reject AI companions being released into the Australian wild without proper safeguards. As noted earlier, the rise of so-called declothing apps, or services that use generative AI to create pornography or nudify images without effective controls, is tremendous cause for concern. There is no positive use case for this kind of app, and they are starting to wreak systematic damage on teenagers across Australia, mostly girls. eSafety has been actively engaging with educators, police, and the apps makers and the app stores themselves, and will be releasing deepfake incident management plans for schools this week as these harmful practices become more frequent and normalized. What is important to underscore is that when either real or synthetic image-based abuse is reported to us, eSafety has a greater than 98% success rate in terms of getting this harmful content down, and our investigators act quickly. Our mandatory Phase 1 standards, which require the tech industry to do more to tackle the highest harm online, like child sexual abuse material, will take effect this week and will help us to force the purveyors and profiteers of these AI-powered nudifying models to prevent them from being misused against children. And our second phase of codes, which I'll talk about shortly, will put in place protections for children from harmful material like pornography, and will force providers of these AI chatbots to protect children from sexualized content. Now, I know that was all a lot to take in, and I'm sure these trends are of deep concern to us all. But they also bring into sharp focus what we are attempting to do and why we are attempting to do it. In essence, we're seeking to create some friction in a system to protect children where previously there has been close to none. And in doing so, we can also provide much needed support for parents and carers struggling with these issues. As the Prime Minister has often said, this legislation is not just about social media finally demonstrating social responsibility. It's also about creating a normative change for parents. It's a constant challenge for parents to juggle the urge to deny access to services they fear are harmful to their kids with the anxiety of leaving the kids feeling socially excluded. I can speak from lived experience with 3 teenagers that this sometimes feels like very effective reverse peer pressure. And while the social media delay will not solve everything, it will create some friction in the system, and this will reinforce some of the other measures I'm also talking about today. Ultimately, this world-leading legislation seeks to shift the burden of reducing harm away from parents and carers and back onto the companies themselves, the companies who own and run these platforms and profit from Australian children. We are treating big tech like the extractive industry it has become. Australia is legitimately asking companies to provide the life jackets and the safety guardrails that we expect from almost every other consumer-facing industry. eSafety is charged with implementing and evaluating this new law, and at the halfway point, we've made significant progress, which puts us well on track to meet the deadline of the 10th of December. The stakes are high, and we know that the eyes of the world are upon us. But I think it's fair to say, as eSafety approaches its 10th birthday, Australia has already led the world in its commitment to online safety, and we are again showing our world-leading credentials. But I want to be clear. The legislation does not give us a mandate to cut the coral cable or de-platform social media apps on stores. Or should we create expectations that every child's social media account will magically disappear overnight? Our implementation of this legislation is not designed to cut off kids from their digital lifelines or to inhibit their ability to connect, to communicate, to create, or explore. Far from it. In that vein, I should also be very clear that there will be no penalties for those underage children who gain access to an age-restricted social media platform, or for their parents or carers who may enable this early access. The responsibility lies, as it should, with the platforms themselves, and there are heavy penalties for companies who fail to take reasonable steps to prevent underage account holders onto their services of up to $49.5 million per breach. While there's still a lot that needs to be considered, a key principle as we approach the implementation is the recognition that children have important digital rights. Rights to participation, the right to dignity, the right to be free from online violence, and of course, the right to privacy. The Privacy Commissioner, Carly Kind, there she is with us today, and she has a very important role here to monitor and enforce compliance with the privacy provisions set out in this legislation, as well as those set out in the Privacy Act. This is a really important part of the regulatory puzzle and demonstrates that protecting privacy and safety need not be mutually exclusive. So we will continue to work together in lockstep on both regulatory guidance and on the implementation of the bill. There is no question that this is one of the most complex and novel pieces of legislation eSafety has ever implemented. There are key milestones that have now been reached and more coming just over the horizon that are bringing us closer to the minimum age obligation taking effect. One of the pivotal steps will involve the Minister for Communications, Annika Wells, making rules on which platforms are included or excluded from the minimum age obligation. While she couldn't be here today, we have already seen that she'll bring great energy and insight into online safety policy going forward. As many of you would know, last week Minister Wells sought my independent safety advice on the draft rules. This was published yesterday for the purposes of full transparency. It will now be up to the minister to make the rules and have them tabled in Parliament to be considered through the usual parliamentary scrutiny process. You would have also seen the release of the preliminary findings of the government's age assurance trial. The trial involves 53 participants and has been looking at the efficacy of a broad range of age assurance technologies and their suitability in the Australian context. The trial has also demonstrated an incredibly positive use case for artificial intelligence. Almost all of the technologies tested employ AI. Age estimation tools are harnessing this the most, but age inference and successive validation tools also use algorithmic analysis. The key preliminary finding is that age assurance can be achieved in Australia in a manner that is private, robust, and effective. eSafety will start consulting upon our regulatory framework this week, and we will use this varied feedback to further hone our regulatory guidance. Under the legislation, captured service providers will have to satisfy me that they have implemented reasonable steps to prevent under-16s from having accounts on their service. We will seek to ensure that our guidelines are clear, effective, proportionate, and fit for purpose. Over the next few months, we will be talking to over 150 stakeholders, including industry, academics, advocates, right groups, parents, and most importantly, young people themselves. These reasonable steps are likely to include the kind of privacy-preserving age assurance measures platforms need to have in place, or the level of proactive detection required by services to identify underage users. We expect that this will require a range of methods and multi-signal age inference tools built into the captured platforms. This will not involve technology mandates, but will likely require a waterfall of effective tools and techniques. E-safety will need to be satisfied that the platforms are going to identify the users under 16 on their services now, and for the companies to be clear about how they will systematically prevent them from joining their services through effective approaches to age assurance at sign-up. Many of these platforms are already using proprietary tools or trialing third-party solutions to do just that today. And despite some claims to the contrary, the technology exists right now for these platforms to identify under 16s on their services without having to age verify everyone on the platform. From our consultation with industry just thus far, we know that at least one major platform has identified under 16s without having to age verify its entire user base. So we expect that both the technology and the cascading age assurance techniques will develop and become more widespread as we move towards the commencement date. Of course, using the least invasive and most privacy-preserving approaches will be key. Now, the platforms covered under the scheme will likely need to satisfy me that they are creating intuitive and discoverable user reporting functionality when underage users are missed, and to actively prevent expected circumvention techniques, including the use of VPNs. Of course, various teenage workaround attempts are inevitable, but the tools also exist for companies to help preempt these end runs. Finally, the companies will be compelled to measure and report on the efficacy and success of their efforts so that we can further gather evidence and evaluate the success. To that end, e-safety is dedicated to incorporating independent evidence and robust evaluation into our implementation, which will be separate from the broader legislated independent review. This will be valuable for us to ensure continuous improvement, but enable us to build an evidence base and provide a blueprint for other nations that want to learn from our approach. E-safety conducted a merit-based process to form an independent academic advisory group to bring rigor and objectivity in helping us evaluate and gather vital evidence. More than half of the advisory group members are Australian, with the remainder drawn from academic centers of excellence and expertise from across the globe. I had the pleasure of convening the inaugural meeting of the advisory group earlier today, and I believe the outputs will put us in good stead to objectively measure both the benefits and the unintended consequences of the implementation. Now, as important as the social media age limits will be in helping delay children's exposure to harmful design features, we are all well aware that it won't be a silver bullet. And this is why e-safety continues to take a holistic approach to protecting, supporting, and empowering young Australians. We remain committed to working with teachers, parents, carers, and young people through our Youth Council, not only to ensure that they're well informed around the risks, but that they're well equipped to thrive online. This means building on our current digital learning arsenal at esafety.gov.au and by developing further co-designed digital literacy and resilience resources. And of course, e-safety's reporting schemes will still be there to provide assistance for Australians if things do go wrong online, including our cyberbullying and image-based abuse schemes. Today, I am also announcing through the Online Safety Act's codes and standards frameworks that we will be moving to register 3 industry-prepared codes designed to limit children's access to high-impact, harmful material like pornography, violent content, themes of suicide, self-harm, and disordered eating. As I mentioned earlier, through these codes, companies agree to apply safety measures up and down the technology stack, including age assurance protections. These provisions will serve as a bulwark and operate in lockstep with the new social media age limits, distributing more responsibility and accountability across 8 sectors of the tech industry. I've informed industry that I plan to register the codes covering enterprise hosting services, internet carriage services such as telcos and other access providers, and search engines. I've concluded that each of these codes provide appropriate community safeguards. I've sought additional safety commitments from industry on the remaining codes, including those dealing with app stores, device manufacturers, social media services and messaging, and the broader categories of relevant electronic services and designated internet services, or the DIS. It's critical to ensure the layered safety approach, which also places that responsibility at critical choke points in the tech stack, including on the app stores and at the device level, the physical gateways to the internet where kids sign up and first declare their ages. For the further broader DIS category, I asked industry to make changes to strengthen protections around AI companions and chatbots. I want to ensure that these provide vital and robust protections. Industry confirmed last week they would seek to make some of these changes, and I plan to make my final determination by the end of the month. If I'm not satisfied these industry codes meet appropriate community safeguards, I will move to making mandatory standards. To wrap up, what gives me great encouragement is the deep community support that exists across Australia for stronger online protections for children, both from harmful content, but also for features deliberately designed to make social media addictive. Australia is proud to be taking a national approach to be setting restrictions for social media services. And while we may be among the first, I'm confident we won't be the last. We're working closely with our international counterparts that share our goals. In true Aussie spirit, we're having a go, and not because it's easy, but because it matters. It's a bold move, yes, but every big change begins with someone willing to take that first step. Australia is building a culture of online safety using multiple interventions, just as we've done so successfully on our beaches. Because the internet, like the ocean, will continue to be a fixture in our lives. And our children, whether they like it or not, are already dipping their toes into the surf, or more likely diving headfirst into those darkest watering holes. As we approach commencement, there is a tremendous opportunity for parents to start having conversations now with their kids about the new rules. We're publishing information on our website about how to start some of these more complex conversations with our children to prepare them for change. This will include resources for parents about understanding VPNs and other circumvention techniques, as well as guides to show kids how they can download their archives and profile content before shutting down their accounts. I believe that this can serve as a signal to all parents that they can take tangible actions with their kids to start the chat and delete the apps, and to reinforce that the government is backing them. So let's make sure the flags are up, the lifeguards are on duty, and the RIPs are clearly marked. Because when it comes to keeping our kids safer online, we all have a role to play. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. So a lot of people would agree with the intention. One of the points often raised is unintended consequences. Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned safeguards around ensuring VPNs, for example, are not used, but workarounds seem to always pop up. So how concerned are you that previously a kid that might have had access to Facebook and TikTok gets something like a VPN and is exposed to all the other ills you were talking about, that could happen on quite a large scale?
It could happen. I mean, 28% of Australians are using VPNs today. Again, we are talking about, under 16s, and most of those are living in the family home, and that's one of the reasons I think it's so important to enable and empower parents to know what VPNs look like, to have conversations with their kids about what they're doing online and what platforms they're using. As we said, this will never be the silver bullet. The idea is to create a delay and to create friction, but to also continue to educate and build the resilience and critical reasoning skills of young people. I mean, like with drinking or smoking, kids will find innovative ways to do end runs and to get around things. I think we just need to be vigilant in knowing what our kids are doing online, talking to them, even basic dinner conversation. We ask our kids about their sports, their friends, their school. how often are we asking them about what they're doing online? And we have to remember, this is a hard parenting challenge because we didn't grow up with it. But for kids, particularly since COVID, their online and offline lives are inextricably tied. So they don't see a difference. So when something happens to them that's harmful online, it affects their entire being in a way that we might be able, as an older generation, to compartmentalize. Oh, this is happening online. This is not happening to my whole being.
So is that the warning for parents? So that would you acknowledge that someone getting a VPN does open a potentially darker door, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, our kid's going to be under 16 is going to be trying to set up VPNs. They're free VPNs. I mean, I think one of the reasonable steps we'll ask the technology companies to take, who are meant to be keeping them off. They can easily get lists of known VPNs so that they can re-verify the age. But there are other things that they can look at, what we call age inference tools. They can look at device fingerprinting. They can look at who the carrier is. They can see if the children are engaging with other 13-year-olds, or if they're only communicating with other Australians outside of school hours. There are lots of things that they can do to see whether or not this might be an underage kid, and we're going to ask them to do some of those things, and then provide parents with the materials they have. But nobody said that this is foolproof.
Go to the first question on the floor, Amanda Kopp from the Nine Network.
Hi, Commissioner. Thank you so much for your speech.
Sure.
There is a lot of scepticism in the community around how effective the social media ban is going to be in terms of actually stopping kids from accessing these platforms. How confident are you that you're going to be able to stop 100% of kids from accessing these platforms? And if not, what percentage do you think is realistic?
Well, again, we're referring to this as a social media delay, not a ban. A ban suggests a total prohibition. This is about putting the burden back on the platforms themselves. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, and that's why I think it's so important to set these expectations, and that parents have a role in sitting down now that this normative change is coming, and when it is in place in December 10th or 11th, sitting down and saying, hey, this is the law of the land. I'll show you how to download your archive so you can keep all your contacts of your friends, but we're going to deprecate your account for a period of time. The other thing that's important there is we know that companies aren't going to get it right the first time. None of these technologies are foolproof, but again, if they're using them in tandem with one another, they'll have greater levels of success. But the user reporting tools will be really important. And the types of questions that the companies ask to prove the date of birth or the age of the user is going to be important too. I mean, we've certainly thought about all the different kinds of end runs. There could be pre-age verified accounts that are sold on the black market. VPNs is kind of another common one. The other interesting feature of this regulation is that it does allow children to be able to view content like YouTube or TikTok, say on the smart TV, in a logged out state. So again, I'm not going to hazard, make a estimation of the percentage. I think some companies will do it really well, and some will probably execute poorly. I was just in France last year, and I went to UBO's headquarters. They have 60 million young people under 16. They've age verified every user twice, and very effectively. The age of 16, their goal there is keeping over 16s off that platform. And then, of course, Instagram has teen accounts. Again, they're probably an example. In speaking to their VP of online safety, they started with basic age inference tools, some of which they've patented, to default underage users into the teen accounts with stronger safety provisions. They haven't age verified everyone. So that, I mean, they can target all of us with deadly precision when it comes to advertising. They can do the same with age. They just haven't had to until this date. And I think it's also worth noting, Earlier this week, I was on a call with 9 of my fellow regulators from around the globe and just spoke to the European Commission the other week. They're all looking at age assurance and age verification at a very high level. So we might be the first, but we're not alone. So these are global platforms. I expect that they were going to put some engineering resources into getting this right.
Excellent. Thank you.
Next question, Ron Misen from the AFR.
Thank you for your speech, Commissioner. YouTube has issued a rather unsurprisingly scathing statement saying the eSafety's advice goes against the government's own commitment, its own research on community sentiment, independent research and the view of stakeholders in this debate. Given the government's commitment in the past on YouTube to exempt it, what has changed and what is the impetus for the Minister coming to you and seeking this advice?
Well, the step of taking independent advice from the independent safety regulator was written into the legislation. When the decision was made by the previous Albanese government, they didn't have the benefit of our insights, of our youth research, of the insights that we gained through our basic online safety expectations transparency reports, through our regulatory insights and reports. So when the minister wrote to me last week asking for this advice, that was one of the specific questions she wanted answered from an evidential standpoint, and that's precisely what we provided. What the research we did with the 2,600 10 to 15-year-olds has shown us, it's a very popular and prevalent platform, the most prevalent used by children, and correspondingly, it's where they achieve the most amount of harm or experience the most amount of harm, 37%. The next platform in that category was TikTok at 23%. So there is quite a large difference in terms of the experiencing of harm. And of course, I could talk to you about some of the illegal and Class 1, Class 2 content we've had to have removed from YouTube. I think any platform that says they're absolutely safe is absolutely spinning words.
Thank you.
I'll get my parent hat on here. YouTube Kids, is that on the banned list or the restricted list?
So as part of our safety advice, we provided five different recommendations, and we asked the minister, given time, to consider the first two. We would consider, there are certain platforms that would be considered lower risk. The other thing I should note is this wasn't just about YouTube. YouTube was the only one exempted. Our recommendation was that no specific platform be exempted because, as I said, the relative risks and harms can change at any given moment, as well as the different features they incorporate. If you think about Instagram 10 years ago, it was a photo sharing app, and then it became more of a social media, and then they've added the DM, and now they have ephemeral media and stories, and they have short form videos, and they have a social media and a social media with threads. So I was talking about the distinction, these specific categories, they're all blurring. Even WhatsApp now is offering channels and advertising. So this is a dynamic field, and we have to be able to stay ahead.
Really quickly, on a practical sense, I mean, YouTube often is just, for some people, they just use it to watch videos. I mean, if there's a teacher at a school that wants to teach something and there's a video on surfing, they can show that to the kids, can they?
Yep, they can do that in a logged out state, absolutely.
Logged out state is
yeah.
fine. Okay.
Yep.
Marnie True from the ABC's next.
Hi, Commissioner. Thank you for your address. In 2023, an eSafety report found that the age assurance technology market was immature but developing. Has that technology improved significantly since then, and how confident are you that the technology exists now to make the ban meaningfully effective, or the delay meaningfully effective come December?
Yeah, we started working on the age verification roadmap in 2021 and delivered the final roadmap in March 2023. And there were members of the safety tech industry that weren't happy with us. But if you sort of look at the numbers and the maturity of the age assurance technologies that were around then vis-a-vis, the broader software development system, it was clearly not as developed. I think we've seen huge growth and maturation and sophistication, as I mentioned, of the 53 that are being tested by the age assurance technical trial that's being run by the department through the age certification checks scheme. All 53 of these technologies utilize some form of AI. So it's kind of an innovation hotbed. So in addition to some of the facial age estimation tools, there's one that uses a lot of medical science about ligaments and ligature, which is a biometric, so it asks you to make different signals with your finger, and it can give you a basic age. And that would be very difficult to re-identify. I don't know what the final scoring or accuracy rates will be on those, but what I'm saying is we're seeing innovation happening here. The more that governments are demanding effective age assurance, the more I expect the industry will start investing and innovating in these areas. So it's kind of exciting when you think about it. And it's not just the technology, it's the ecosystem that's maturing. So there's the whole concept of vouching or third-party proofing. I started working on an age verification pilot when I was working for Microsoft here in 2008. And we were talking about using schools to vouch for kids, or the 100 points test that OzPost delivers. So there are lots of different ways. There'll be challenges with each one of them. But what the preliminary findings do say is that the technology is here and it's possible. None is going to solve every use case. But again, we expect that companies will take layered approaches and use multiple proprietary tools alongside the highest tested third-party tools.
Thank you very much.
Corey McLeod from Innovation Oz.
Thank you for your address, Commissioner. Are you concerned that the measures will attract retaliation, if you like, from the Trump administration that has said it would protect US digital platforms from these kinds of regulatory actions? And I've heard them described as weakening the relationship between Australia and the US.
Well, that's really a question from government to government level. Of course, we're engaged with DFAT in centrals, but I would say just this week, President Trump extended the TikTok ban that was passed by Congress last year. And that takes a much more blunt force approach to removing an entire app from the App Store and finding people who are using the app based on national security purposes. But I'd also say at the state level, there are a number of AI accountability bills, age verification bills. So I'd say that it's quite mixed. There's quite a bit of interest in the United States. The U.S. Supreme Court is going to make a decision around age verification very soon, and whether it will pass muster under the First Amendment. I would just say on the positives, I was just on a board call with the We Protect Global Alliance, which combats child sexual abuse, with the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. In December, we worked with DHS to develop a safety by design toolkit with 40 technology and AI companies, all of them domiciled in America, and we've created a great toolkit to combat CSEA. And President Trump just signed the Take It Down Act, which will deal with deep fakes and remove image-based abuse. We've had a very similar scheme in place for almost 8 years. So again, I think we can find lots of areas where there's synergies and where we care about the same things. And global collaboration is what we have to be doing. The internet's global. We know that laws are national and local. And that's why we're the founders of the Global Online Safety Regulators Network as well. We're much stronger together. I mean, a lot of these companies are as large and wealthy as nation states, so we need to band together with like-minded countries.
Thank you.
Jack Quayle from The Australian.
Thanks very much, Ms. Inman Grant, for your address. I just wanted to follow up with what Ron and Tom asked specifically about YouTube. I mean, while you've noted in your advice to government that the platform poses risk to children, it also is a source of, educational content, as Tom mentioned, entertainment as well. These restrictions on social media have garnered a really strong, support from the community. But with this advice, do you risk undermining community support from parents, from teachers, with your advice to scrap the exemption? Or do you think that you've got, the public on side with your recommendation?
Well, I don't make determinations or write recommendations to the minister based on whether I keep the public on side. I follow the evidence. And my main concern with these platforms is obviously that harm's happening, but I talked about the persuasive design features. I mean, YouTube has mastered those. The opaque algorithms driving users down rabbit holes that they are powerless to fight against. I mean, you got to think about, the constant notifications. This is not a fair fight where our kids are concerned vis-a-vis social media sites. So I wrote based on where the evidence took me and what my concerns are about the safety of children, and that's always going to surpass any concerns I have about politics or being liked or bringing the public on side.
Yep, thank you.
And to clarify on that from before, if you're not logged, there won't be a restriction if you're not logged in.
No,
Is that how
you can still view that from logged in accounts. And none of the advice says that, of course there's valuable educational material, but as TikTok and Instagram and others would have said, well, we have educational material too. So again, I think what we're trying to do here is harness the positives and still enable people to engage without the persuasive and pervasive pull of these opaque algorithms and technologies that are designed to make social media addictive, or further, if you're looking for diet information, to further send information about bulimia and anorexia. We see that all the time.
Olivia Ireland from the SMH and The Age.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your speech. A part of the Trump administration's push for free speech has said that they've threatened retaliation against people who impinge on online speech. Are you concerned about being able to return to the US yourself, or what might happen if you were to go to the US?
Well, I guess the way I look at the Online Safety Act, and next week we are experiencing our 10-year anniversary. We were created by a democratically elected parliament as an independent statutory authority. The laws that we administer through the Online Safety Act are passed by the parliament and the thresholds. My goal is to help Australians have safer, more positive experiences online. And yes, we're dealing with difficult issues around speech. We're not regulating regulating DEI, we're not regulating political content, opinions, journalistic content. This is purely about harm targeting Australian individuals. So with cyberbullying, it's menacing, harassing, intimidating, and threatening content that's targeting a child. It's much higher where adults are concerned. We have to prove serious intent to harm and that it's menacing, harassing, and offensive in all cases to an ordinary reasonable person. That is such a high threshold above defamation. We've only used our formal powers 6% of the time. So we also have transparency and accountability requirements. So you can challenge a decision that I make. You can challenge it through internal review, through the ART, through the Ombudsman, or through the federal court. And that is starting to happen, and that's legitimate. The more the powers and how we administer them are tested, the more we can look to Delia Rickard's excellent Online Safety Act review and start implementing some of the changes. No bill is going to be created that doesn't have flaws or doesn't anticipate technology moving 20 times faster than probably 20 million times faster than any legislation can. So I actually see what we're doing as protecting Australian voices. online, because it is those who are most vulnerable that tend to be targeted online, and we don't take action unless there is an Australian on the other end that's experiencing hurt and harm at a considerable level.
So no concern if you were to enter the US?
I'm not planning on going to the US anytime soon. I'll defer to my DFAT colleagues to see whether or not they see risks.
Thank you.
Lachlan Leaning from Leeming, I should say, from News Corp.
Hi, Commissioner. Thanks for your speech. Just as we sat down to eat before, Shadow Communications Minister Melissa McIntosh issued a statement. I'll just read a couple of quotes from it. With just 6 months to go until these changes commence, it is disappointing the government is only just now getting advice from the E-Safety Commissioner. There are more questions than answers right now, including what verification technology will be required, which platforms are in or out, and what constitutes platforms taking reasonable steps to implement social media age minimum standards by 10th of December. Whichever way you look at this issue, the Albanese Labor government is failing to keep up with its own deadline to protect Australian kids online, end quote. What is your response to this criticism, and are you prepared today to give a guarantee that the structures required for those age limits will be in place by December 10?
Well, I don't think it's fair to say that work hasn't been done. I tried to just in December, my COO and I were in Washington, D.C., speaking to the vice presidents of Snap and Meta and others to prepare them for what they're doing. They know this is coming, they know this is law, and they're already looking at the ways to do this. We're halfway through. I sort of just I kind of tried to chunk out for you the kind of areas that we'll be looking to build reasonable steps. What are your underage 16s on your platform now, and what are you going to do to deprecate those? What are you going to do to prevent under 16s from having accounts at sign up? What kind of user reporting functionality when things are missed are you going to provide? What are you going to do to prevent circumvention? And we will have reasonable steps there. And then what do we need from you in terms of reporting on efficacy? All that is incredibly doable. We have a straw man for what those reasonable steps would look like. We're starting our consultations this week. We put an EOI out a month and a half ago, so we've identified all the stakeholders we're going to be engaging with. I am sure there will be more. Yes, once the minister makes the final determination around the rules, that'll give us some clarity. So yeah, we may be building the plane a little bit as we're flying it, but there was an election and a caretaker period, and there was a period of time where this couldn't be discussed, but I'm very confident we can get there.
By December 10?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Tess Economou from AAP.
Thank you very much for your time today, Commissioner. Some experts have raised the issue of vulnerable groups of young people not being able to form communities online or seeking support from other people online. I was just wondering how you kind of balance that against a delay of them not being able to do that, and whether you think that that could in fact kind of harm them on the other flip side to that.
I mean, that was an issue that I raised concerns about when the legislation was being deliberated, because we know from research with culled communities, with communities of disability or ability, with LGBTQI plus folks, that they feel more themselves online than they do in the real world, and they can find their tribe. And that's precisely why I was clear in saying we're not trying to cut kids' digital lifelines or to prevent them from communicating, exploring, and creating. And we'll see what the final rules look like, but in the initial draft, of course, some of the platforms and services that were exempted are in the form of messaging and online gaming services where communities can be formed and where kids are using now. I mean, the simple fact of the matter is adults are probably using social media sites more than kids are today. And so I think we can do both. I think we can also start stimulating some interpersonal communication and engagement in school cafeterias and playgrounds. I know that was a vision the Prime Minister had of seeing more kids kicking the footy. That's what we plan to help measure in terms of both the positives, and we'll look at the unintended consequences. And if we see indications that that kids are really hurting or being damaged in some way, then we'll go to the government and we'll figure out a solution to how we can solve those issues. But this is why I don't like the term social media ban. It's not a total prohibition of children using technology. It's just keeping them from those darker, more powerful unseen forces in the way of algorithms and other pervasive designs that are designed to keep them scrolling and addictive and amplifying outrage, frankly.
Josh Martin from the 7 Network.
Thanks for your speech, Commissioner. Currently, when teenagers turn 16 in Australia, they can go for their driver's licence. After December, they'll be able to get a social media account. In that spirit, does the government need to look at the education curriculum to get kids ready for having a social media account? And just to clarify a question Tom asked, will kids be able to have a YouTube Kids account after December?
That will depend on the rules that are ultimately drafted. We would consider that probably a lower risk site. So we've been asked about Lego Play and others. That might be one that is considered designed with a child in mind, with very ample safety features that we would deem to be lower risk. So I can't answer that question definitively until I see the rules. But again, yeah, we certainly there are programs that are out there that are very enriching and educational.
Thank you.
Simon Gross from Canberra IQ.
I understand it. So if a kid turns 13 at the end of this year, you're going to tell them they can download all their contacts on whatever platforms they're on and archive them somewhere, and in 3 years' time they can re-establish them. Is that right?
I haven't figured out the mechanics of all
Okay,
of that
but-
yet, but essentially yes.
Okay.
You can download your archive today, so you can see all your posts and you can have the different handles and the contact information, so you're not losing touch.
So what's stopping them, having done that, moving to a platform that's not covered by your scheme and just starting up again and hanging around?
Well, I fully expect that teenagers will try and find other places to congregate. They do that now with messaging,
Sure.
with group messaging, with text, with groups on WhatsApp, even with groups on FaceTime. So I think the difference will be they will be grouped more with their peers rather than billions of people from around the world that are adults and kids and strangers.
Okay.
Caitlin Rintoul from the West Australian.
Thank you for your address today, Commissioner. You spoke a lot about the issues of sex abuse online. I want to talk about safety on online dating apps. Last year, Australia introduced a voluntary new industry code. And while codes are great, does that go far enough? Would you like to see some mandatory settings? And does it have enough teeth currently, this sector?
Well, as you know, it was set up after a very tragic killing of Daniel Finlay Jones, and it was set up as a voluntary initiative. We have yet to, and I think this is coming in a few months, to evaluate the efficacy of the voluntary codes. If I don't think they're adequate, then I will suggest to government that we move to a mandatory code. I think we've learned a lot through the codes and standards from the Online Safety Act of 2021. I remember having conversations with some of my colleagues at the department who are no longer there saying, hey, I know these, co-regulatory codes, they worked really well in the 1990s with the telcos that are based here, but I'm putting on my, I spent 22 years in the tech industry, I'm putting on my industry. We love those kind of codes. You can kick the can down the street, you can make them really weak. And it's a lot of work for the government to turn them into anything that has teeth. So they said, okay, well, we hear you, so we'll give you this ability to make standards. It took us 3.5 years to get codes and standards in place using that method around illegal content, child sexual abuse material, and terrorist and violent extremist content that is illegal here and illegal almost everywhere. So I don't know. I think if you want to move quickly, you probably wouldn't use co-regulatory codes.
Thank you.
Just got 30 seconds or so. Let me ask you this to finish things up. Social media companies have always wanted to make the most money, and that means having the most people on for the most amount of time. Do you expect that to change?
No, that's the business model, unless they change the business model. But if I understand correctly, when Meta, then Facebook, acquired WhatsApp, the Dutch owner that sold it to him did not want any advertising, ended up leaving. That could become a very lucratizing advertising model. So I don't think anything is off the table. They are profit-driven organizations that have huge pressure to become, multi-trillion-dollar organizations. So they will look at different ways to monetize you, and you see even through the schools when Google and others are offering free software, they're not free at all. It's your data or your child's data. So there's always a cost somewhere.
Well, the eyes of the nation and the world will be on how this rolls out and how it works. We appreciate your time today. Please accept our gift of membership as well.
Oh, wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Julie Inman Grant.